And top of the morning to you all, and happy St. Patrick's Day. And thank you for joining us for this very special presentation. And it's part of our ongoing series of Kerby Centre Health and Wellness information presentations, many of which are sponsored by Servus Credit Union. And we thank them for their generous support this year as sponsors. Before we begin, as we gather here today, it's vital we also remember the peoples who've gathered here for millennia. This is the Treaty 7 land of the Indigenous peoples of Southern Alberta, the Blackfoot nations of Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Lesley, and the historic home of the Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. It is with the goal of reconciliation that we acknowledge the land on which we gather and thank the elders of these nations for their timeless contributions to the land. And again, Caid Mila Falcha, which is 100,000 welcomes. Did I do justice to that, Lesley?
You did indeed.
100,000 welcomes. Thank you very much for joining us for this exciting special presentation today. We've all been cooped up for a year and many of us are so missing the opportunity to travel. And this is a great opportunity for us today to live vicariously while we take a virtual tour of Ireland with Lesley Keyter, Calgary's renowned travel lady. No passports or vaccinations required. So sit back, relax, enjoy your green beer, green tea, Irish coffee, my Irish soda, and just enjoy the tour. Many of you will recognize Lesley as she's been the face of the travel in Calgary for several years. Every week since 1997, she's been featured live on the morning news of Global TV, Calgary's primary morning TV show. Widely known as the travel lady, she's recognized as the leading vacation expert in Southern Alberta. Born in England, Lesley grew up in South Africa. She travels often and has extensive knowledge of East and Southern Africa, Australia, and much more. She's also an avid cruiser with a deep knowledge of the most popular ocean and river cruise lines. She has a passion for travel and says she has the best job in Calgary. I would agree with that.
Yes.
She is frequently interviewed on Travel Matters by CBC National TV, CBC Radio, 660 News, Global Television, and other radio and TV programs in Canada. She's also been an invited contributor to well-known magazines such as Chatelaine, Calgary's Child, and Reader's Digest. She edits her own newsletter sent out to over 8,000 subscribers every week. You're a very busy girl.
I am.
Lesley, I'm so excited to be taking this tour to a place that I have long been on my bucket list to explore personally. And on St. Patrick's Day, no less, that we get to do this. But before we begin the tour, tell us how COVID has affected the travel industry. And do we have any positive information to look forward to having the ability to travel again anytime soon?
Well, it's true, Colleen. You know, COVID has been going on much longer than we ever anticipated. A year ago today, I thought this will all be over by June. So the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say. We do have light at the end of the tunnel now with the vaccinations coming along. My husband booked his this morning for next week, and it was a very quick and easy process. So that seems to be going smoothly. And with people getting their vaccinations now, they're really looking forward to traveling next year. So 2022 is going to be a bumper year. And I know my girls have been extremely busy with making bookings for that timeline. Of course, we all need to be cautious about where we travel right now, and we need to heed the government advisories. So we are taking care to do that and hoping that we're all working together to get that advisory lifted.
One of the phrases that I've heard recently, which was interesting, is revenge travel. People are they're so angry about having been cooped up for so long. It's like, I'm booking my trip. As soon as I can go, I'm booking my trip. So I imagine you're going to be very busy. Well, thank you very much. We're looking forward to the presentation today.
Thank you. So let me go ahead now. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. So let's go ahead and we can start this presentation, and I will start this from the beginning. Oops.
Go to your slideshow, go to your slideshow, click on slideshow at the top.
Yeah, it's covered by the...
Oh dear. And then you need to go to from the beginning at the left.
Yes, but from the beginning. Ah, here we go. Thank you. You know,
No, we're
that's okay. We got
it too.
So thank you for your patience while we got that up and running. I appreciate it.
Beautiful colors.
We've done our little update with COVID. So a little bit of background about my Irish connection. This picture you see here is a picture of my mom's family in the cottage where she was born in County Cavan, Ballyjames-Duff. And you can just see my mom peeping over the shoulder of her brother there with her mom in the background. She was one of 7 children, and they had kind of a little plot with a few chickens and maybe a lamb or 2. And they naturally were quite poor. They worked on the land. My mother always used to say that her mother had an expression that when things were getting a bit tough, she would say, "To hell with poverty, let's kill a chicken." And she'd go out into the yard and she'd go and grab a chicken and slice its head off. And that was dinner in the pot. They used to go out and regularly dig peat to put on the fires. And when you go to Ireland today and you go into some of the traditional pubs, it's great to see those old peat fires still going, because it makes things really authentic. So my mom left Ireland, went to England when she was about 20, met my dad, who was an English sailor, and consequently I lived all over the place. So that's another story, all the different places I've seen. But it's St. Patrick's Day today. So let's talk about St. Patrick. I mean, he is the patron saint of Ireland. Well, here's the thing, he wasn't Irish. St. Patrick was English, and he was born to quite a well-to-do family. And he was kidnapped at the age of 16 by a group of Irish raiders who used to cross the sea, and kind of almost like Irish Vikings, I suppose. So they took him back to Ireland, and he spent 6 years working as a shepherd until he managed to escape. And he walked all the way to the east coast of Ireland so he could get across the channel and go back to England. But when he got back to England, you know, he'd had visions and he'd heard voices, and he thought maybe he had a mission. And so he enrolled to become a priest. And then his message that he got from God was to spread Catholicism and the word of God to the Irish in Ireland. So after he was ordained as a priest, he went back and he spread the word. But now St. Patrick was quite a feisty man. You know, he would take up arms against people who pagans, as he would call it, the Druids, and he would fight and knock them to the ground. So he was quite a fit fellow indeed. He became St. Patrick as the patron saint of Ireland, and 17th of March is the day that is revered for Irish or anybody with a little touch of the Irish all over the world. So let's take a look at Ireland itself and the history. So Ireland has been occupied so many times. As you can see, it's, you know, exactly the location just off the coast of the west of England. The Celts were probably the first in about 1200 BC. And it's interesting, Celts is actually a term that the Romans gave for the barbarian people of Belgium and northern France. And they moved across to Ireland to try and take up territory there because they were being pushed out by the Romans. They didn't have much time there though, because hundreds of years later, they were followed by the Vikings. Now, the Vikings, we know, were great explorers, and they would come and attack and plunder Ireland. This was about 800 BC, and they established themselves there for about 300 years, where they were later kicked out by the Normans. So then the 12th century, the Normans arrived, and they started taking up the land, very fertile land, so it was very attractive to the Normans. And they took people across from England, they called them planters, and gave out Irish land to these planters and kind of shoved the Irish off into becoming tenant peasants, I guess, if you will. And then Oliver Cromwell arrived in the 1600s. And this is a very, very dark period of Irish history. Oliver Cromwell was determined to wipe out the Catholics in Ireland. He was obviously famous for the reform in England and the destruction of the Catholic Church there. So when he entered on the east side, he basically pushed all of the people towards the west. And there were many ships that left then, even in those very early days, where people escaped from Cromwell and from his troops. He would particularly go after the monasteries and the churches and the priests. So very often the priests would have to disguise themselves as peasants. And there's one story where a priest who had taken off his robes and disguised himself as a peasant was running away from Cromwell and his troops. And he came across a woman who was near death on the side of the road. And he could not help his calling, but he knelt down beside her to pray over and give her the last rites. And Cromwell's soldiers knew that he was a priest, and they had him and they strung him up before he had a chance. So these were all memories in people's minds of generation after generation growing up in Ireland. And then the next great terrible event to take place in Ireland was the Great Famine. 1845, there's so many poems and so much literature about this terrible time for the Catholics. Well, not just the Catholics, there was also the Protestants there if they were tenant farmers or not very wealthy, because they had little plots of land and they didn't grow cereal very well there. And the potato that was brought from South America became a stable crop for them. Now, in 1945, it got what they called the blight. The crop was blighted, not as they would pull the potatoes up and they'd just be wasted and rotted in the soil. And they had no other resource for food. The British government was badly criticized at the time and in history afterwards for not having helped the Irish enough in this. In their defense, it was difficult because they were getting barley and corn and other crops that were coming in from the empire. And so it was difficult for them, but they could have done more. Nevertheless, it was terrible. It caused the death of about 1 million people and the big emigration that happened. 2.5 million people over the course of 6 years left Ireland. Most left for America, but a lot of Irish who emigrated also got to Canada. Now, if you ever go to New York and you go to Ellis Island, you'll see some recollections of Irish people arriving, and the recordings that they've done of people arriving there are very interesting. But of course, a lot came to Canada as well. And where did they settle? They settled in the Maritimes. So hence, you have that accent that is so distinctive in the Maritimes. And when I first came here in 96, I kept bumping into people and I'd talk to them for a little while and then I'd say, hang on, you're Irish. And they say, oh, no, I'm from Newfoundland. And it happened so many times that I really kept tripping myself up now. I had the pleasure to visit Newfoundland about 2 years ago, and it was fabulous to hear those accents and see how the culture remains so strong there. So certainly the Irish fanning out like that during this terrible famine really spread their culture around the world and put their roots. That's why today St. Patrick's is such a great celebration all over the world. Then the next, oh, and here, sorry, the famine statues in Dublin. If ever you go to Dublin, you will see these. And they also have copies of the famine ships that took the starving people out of Ireland. They're very moving and something definitely on your list to see. So the next big event in Ireland was the Easter Rising. And if you're interested at all, there's a good series on Netflix called Rebellion, which details this. It's about 12 episodes or so. And this is when the Republicans in Ireland, they had little rebellions throughout the years, but they wanted their own government and they were sick of the British ruling them. So in 1916, they took over the General Post Office in the main street in Dublin. And for 3 days, they were holed down there. They brought in the British troops, overwhelmed them, outnumbered them extremely. They couldn't possibly survive that kind of competition, and eventually they failed. This is a photo of the post office in Dublin, what it looked like afterwards with the bombardment that they had received. And it's interesting because if you go to Dublin today and you go on a tour, you can go into the General Post Office, which is a beautiful building, marble floors, and you can still see the bullet holes. They didn't repair those. And that kind of is a nice, I don't know, reminder or memory of history. So much of our history gets obliterated. So it's nice to be able to see those little parts of the history. So the next big event after this terrible uprising, where the leaders of the uprising were shot by firing squad, there was one person who was one of the leaders of the rebellion, and that was De Valera. And he was the first Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland in 1921 when they did the partition of Ireland. And you can see Northern Ireland there at the top. That remained separate. It remained under British rule, the 6 counties as it's called. And of course, this became the base for what we would know later on as the Troubles, which was at its worst during the 60s. Now, during the 60s, as I said earlier, my mom met my dad in England and he was serving with the Royal Navy. So as a child, we would move from place to place all over the United Kingdom. And he got a draft into Londonderry in Northern Ireland. And that was very interesting for me because it was in the 60s. I think we left there in 1965. And the Troubles there started in about 67, 68. So we were very lucky to have avoided that. But it was an interesting time because there was still a lot of conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland, or as people would like to call them, to leave out the religion side of things, the Republicans, who were the Irish, and the Loyalists, who were the Protestants, basically. So there was a lot of that going on, but it was all kind of under the carpet. When we got to Londonderry, mind you, the Irish people call that Derry, but the British call it Londonderry. When we got there, I was enrolled at Londonderry High School for girls, which was a very prestigious school, and went along with my parents to sign up, do the paperwork. My dad was in full uniform, and the headmistress was charming, loved serving the British forces, etc. She brought the paperwork out and she said to my mom, will you fill this in? And of course, there's the inevitable question, what religion are you? So my mom put down RC, Roman Catholic. The headmistress nearly had a heart attack. She said, you can't be Roman Catholic. And my dad said, why not? She said, well, you're in the Royal Navy. He said, well, I'm Roman Catholic. She said, that's a bit of a problem. Then she looked at me. She said, now you listen to me, girlie. You come to my school. You do not mention to anybody that you are Roman Catholic. Have you got that? I said, well, yes, miss. and I never, ever did. And it was a very strange situation. But it put it into perspective for me later on. My mom tried to get a job there, a part-time job. And when she filled in that she was Catholic, the lady at the cafe said, you know what, you're a sweetheart, but I cannot. It's more than my business is worth for me to employ you. So it gives you a little bit of a look-see of what the situation was like in Northern Ireland. Not that that excuses any of the violence that happened, but still. Now let's get on with our trip to Ireland. So Dublin, one of the most beautiful cities. Most tours will start off in Dublin. And Trinity College is renowned the world over for being the home of many of the world's poets and scientists, and still a very busy, prosperous university today. We just did a tour. We didn't even book the tour in advance, actually. We went to the gate and there were a whole bunch of students standing there in their academic gowns. And we were able to just go up and say, yeah, we'd like to join the tour. And they said, okay, this is the next round that's going to do the tour. And they took us actually on a tour of their college themselves, which was a very nice way to do it. And this is the library. Look at that library. Isn't it just something like out of Harry Potter?
Gorgeous.
Absolutely incredible place. They have so many, for people who are book lovers and historians, they have so many first editions of some of the famous literature. And you wouldn't be going to Dublin if you didn't have a pint of Guinness. And this is myself and my daughter Mandy. We did a trip to Ireland about 3 years ago. And we were in one of the pubs in Dublin. And I said to the barman, you know, I've always wanted to pull a pint. And when I lived in Ireland, I was too young to do that. Oh, he says, get yourself behind the bar then. And so there I poured my pint. And he said to me, I was very good. He said, if I ever came back, I could maybe have a little part-time job or something in Dublin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little video here. Let's see if this works. It's a little walk around Dublin just to give you a glimpse of what you could expect when you're there. So there's a little glimpse of Dublin, but of course there's more to Ireland than Dublin. So some of the favorite places that I'd visited there are a little bit more off the beaten track. For example, the little village of Kinsale. Now it's right down the south of Ireland. And when you look at tours that go of Ireland, you won't find many of the big bus tours going to places like this. Generally, they'll do Waterford, they'll do Blarney Castle, and they'll bypass this, but it's a very important place. And it's known as the gourmet capital of Ireland because it has so many eateries there, so many nice little restaurants and pubs. And it's known as one of the most picturesque and oldest towns in Ireland. So this was a very important strategic point because it's on an estuary. And it was very easily defended, but the English were too late. There was a big battle in Kinsale, and the Spanish were able to land in Kinsale and fight the British. The British won, or the English, I should call them. They won, but after that, they were a bit worried. So they thought they better build some forts. And you can see this from the air. It's this typical star fort formation, and you'll see this all over the world. For those of you who've been to San Juan in Puerto Rico, it's exactly the same layout. So this was known to work very well with the different turrets and the protected area inside. So this is one of the harbors on one side. In fact, this area here was known for the area. It was just 1915. It was just outside these waters where the Lusitania was torpedoed by a German U-boat and everybody was killed on board. So these waters have always been very active. And here's the other fort, James Fort Kinsale. That's myself there in the picture doing some walking. This is a great place for walking. It's fabulous little lanes, great areas, cafes, just a super area. Really recommend it if you go down there. And here's another place that we went to, which was not as popular. Now, when you've looked at itineraries for Ireland, you've probably seen the Ring of Kerry, and you've heard of the Ring of Kerry. So the Ring of Kerry is just below the Dingle Peninsula. And I like to think that the Dingle Peninsula is like a Ring of Kerry, but smaller and more authentic and less traffic. Here you can see in the picture, one of the Famine cottages. These are deserted cottages that were left when people who were dying of the famine or who buried many family members just left the farms and got on the ships to come to America and make a new life there. So one of the things of this area, though, is, first of all, the Gaelic language. This was one of the first places to say that they would make a bilingual county. So where Dingle is, you'll see all the signs are in Gaelic as well as in English. Some places you go to, the signs are only in Gaelic. So if you ever decide to do a drive yourself tour of the Dingle, make sure you've got a GPS, otherwise you may not be able to follow the signs very well. But one of the outstanding things about Ireland in any of the areas that you visit, but especially these smaller areas, is if you go into a pub, you will find music. And usually it's not a band that's got together, it's just people, musicians. They get together, sometimes they're sitting with their back to you. They don't even care, they're playing for themselves. And it just makes the whole atmosphere so amazing. So when we think of Ireland, we think of music. So I couldn't let you not hear some traditional Irish music of the sort you'll hear in a pub.
Unfortunately, the music is not coming through, Lesley.
Oh, it's not.
No.
Hang on.
Might need to check, share your
Okay, let's see your screen sharing.
The bottom of the box, or the bottom of that box.
Yes, hang on, you are screen sharing, new share. Video settings, maybe?
Typically, if you go into your box to select your PowerPoint to show, if there's a little section on the bottom that you can share your computer sound.
Oh, okay. I can't seem to find that, and I don't want to hold up the meeting with that. Okay.
What we can do is anything that you have.
Hang on, I found it. I found it. Let's try that again.
Good job. Good job.
Is that it?
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
You don't want to miss that.
No. She's great on those spoons, isn't she?
Yes.
That's a real skill.
That's absolutely, that makes your Celtic heart sing.
It does, hey? So further around sites that you want to see that are famous in Ireland, the Rock of Cashel. This is also known as St. Patrick's Rock, so it's appropriate we should be featuring this today. It's a medieval castle that dates back to the 5th century AD, and it's famous for the medieval architecture inside and the Celtic art. It's abandoned, so when you go inside, you can walk around these empty rooms, but you see the carvings on the walls, and it's a very magical place. It's a pilgrimage spot for many people to go and visit, you know, even the Irish themselves in Ireland. And here's another great spot that people go. Now, I have to admit, although I can talk, I've never kissed the Blarney Stone, because I've heard tales of young local lads going up there late on a Saturday night and peeing on the wall. So they call it the germiest rock in Ireland.
I bet.
And nowadays, because of this COVID, there's no more kissing the rock. So that makes sense as well. So maybe that's something that you'll just have to take a photograph of the rock in future. And I think really you're not missing anything if you don't get to kiss the Blarney Stone.
You can always pretend.
Exactly. So we're talking about Ireland, and Ireland is an island and so tightly woven with the north. You cannot miss out the north. It's just as full of mystery and beauty as the other parts of Ireland. So let's look at some of the wonderful spots I got to visit when I was there. This is called the Dark Hedges. It's absolutely incredible to see this photo without anybody in it. I think this was a publicity photo that was maybe taken by one of the producers of Game of Thrones, because this features in the Game of Thrones. And when I was there, I could not get a picture without somebody. It's always full of people. But isn't it amazing?
I'm sorry, Lesley, what was the name of that location?
It's called the Dark Hedges in Northern Ireland. Yes.
I'm making notes for my trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to go and see this place. It's on all of the itineraries, really, because it's just so magical.
That is spectacular.
Yeah, and so mystical, and you know, the Irish are very fey people. You know, they believe in leprechauns and they believe in fairies, and in some senses, maybe St. Patrick was right when he thought he was going to go across and convert these pagan people, because you never quite give up on those old ideas, and this kind of imagery just gives you that feeling of I don't know, a witch's lair.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. But that's definitely one of the high spots to go and visit. And then the Giant's Causeway. Now, this is really, it's a geological phenomenon caused by earthquakes and the earth and the continents rising and whatnot. That's a very boring explanation for this, because the legend is that there were two giants, and the giant on the right side who lived in Ireland, Finn McCool, and he was having a fight with the Scottish giant who lived just across the sea, which is where the coast of Scotland is. So they were having a fight and they wanted to get to each other. So Finn McCool laid out a bridge. He put all these stones together till it reached all the way over to Scotland, and he could stride across the bridge and go and kill the Scottish giant. But the Scottish giant was so mad, he came and destroyed the middle of the bridge in one hammer throw. So in fact, when you go to the coast of Scotland, right across the way, you will see a similar geographical formation in the rocks there. And I think the giant story is quite nice. You see in this picture, the sun is shining. We had a brilliant day when we went there, the sun was shining. And our guide said, I cannot believe this day. And he got me to take about 6 pictures of him, because he said, I'm sending it back to other customers that I've brought along this way. He said, where it was pouring with rain and we had to go out in our raincoats. So that's one of the things that you have to remember about Ireland. When you go on your trip there, you have to take your raincoat, because it's not called the Emerald Isle for nothing. There's a lot of rain there and you have to be prepared for it. But, you know, if it rains, you can always get into one of the little towns there. Northern Ireland is so quaint. Really, these little alleyways, and you can see almost the Victorian element of the place, and no traffic. I love these little alleyways where there's no traffic, and it really gives you a chance to explore and get to meet the shopkeepers. It's very special.
It's so colorful. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, a lot of the towns there have taken on, in Kinsale, they do the same thing, where the council gave an allowance for paint and people could paint their doorways, window frames, different colors, make them look bright and lively. And it's interesting, we get the same sort of thing in St. John's. I don't know for anybody who's been there, you see all those multicolored doors and window frames. So it kind of extends that Irish feel to both sides. Now, I spoke earlier about Londonderry, or Derry as the Irish call it, and it's a very interesting city, and it's one of the few cities in Europe that has an intact wall around the whole city. It's about a mile, and it's got 7 gates along the way. Built in 1613, now you remember I mentioned about the English bringing across the planters and Scottish to Ireland. Northern Ireland particularly was very lush. It was much more lush than Scotland. So they brought people across there and they booted the local farmers off their land and awarded vast settlements of land for these planters who were going to plant crops for import into England. Well, of course, naturally, the local Irish people didn't like that idea, so they were very rebellious. So to protect the people living in Derry, or Londonderry as it was renamed, the English built this wall in 1613. You can see the cannon along there, and it's a wide walking wall. You can do lots of tours around there and stop at the different gates, and your tour guide will give you a history of the place. And this is just one of the gates that's still intact, right in the middle of town now, of course, because town has expanded beyond the walls of the city. But it's very interesting. And when I went to school there, I would regularly walk through these gates to get into Londonderry High School and then come out of there to catch the bus on the way home. So it's interesting to see how the old still lives with the new. Belfast itself is a beautiful city. They've got some wonderful buildings there. Remember that it is the birthplace of the Titanic. It was in the shipyards of Belfast where the Titanic was built. And the museum is excellent there. It's got a lot of artifacts from not just the building of the Titanic, but of the sinking of the Titanic that they've managed to salvage. And it's got a lot of history of the people who were on the Titanic, the people who were lost there. While there in Belfast, there's a lot of different tours you can do. One of the tours that I did is what they call a black cab tour or a black taxi tour. And what they've done is they've taken those traditional black taxis that are so famous in London. And you go around with a driver. You can fit about 4 people in the back, maybe 5, because it's got the little plop down seat. So there's 5 of you in the back. And they will take you around the political murals and what they call the peace line. And what was interesting to me is, of course, Belfast was the center of the Troubles with the Shankill district and the Falls district back in the 60s. You had a Catholic neighborhood and a Protestant neighborhood very close together. So you can imagine there was a lot of trouble there. And in the black cab tour that we took, half of the tour, we were taken by one driver who was Catholic from Belfast. And then at a certain point, we would stop and we would swap drivers and we would have a Protestant driver and he would take us around. And it gave a really good perspective from 2 people of their view of the Troubles and what happened. I mean, everybody in Belfast, everybody in Ireland wants peace, but sometimes these little things flare up again. But these 2 guys were really good friends. And we said, you know, when you finished your shifts, I mean, do you 2 ever get together and have a beer or a Guinness? Oh, yes, they said. Oh, sure, we do, we do. So we said, well, where do you have it? Do you have it in the Irish neighborhood or the Protestant neighborhood? Oh, no, we have it in neutral territory downtown. So okay, that makes total sense. But they took us out to see some of the murals, which are very powerful indeed. As you can see, it was a scary time, prepared for peace, but ready for war. There's a lot of memorials here to people like Bobby Sands, who went on a hunger strike and died in jail. Other innocent people who were killed by the IRA, killed by the Ulster Defence Force. It's always a pointless exercise, isn't it? Political upheaval like this. This really shook me. This is the peace line. And these are gates that somebody has painted this lovely mural on, because at 6 o'clock every evening, even now, they close the gates that close off a Catholic neighborhood from a Protestant neighborhood. And I said to my guide, I said, I can't believe that. I mean, I'm half Irish, but is this really still happening? He said, sure, it's the kids. You know, they come to the gate and they taunt each other and call them names. And he said, it's not anything. He said, but we've been doing it and we think, you know what? Let's just keep things safe. We don't want a kid wandering down into an area, something happens, the community blames the other side. And I thought, wow, that is just quite astonishing. But anybody who knows Ireland and watches films will know Pierce Brosnan, this handsome Irish man who's done so well for himself. And I have this little video, and if it doesn't, just raise your hand, Colleen, if the sound doesn't come on, but let's listen to what Pierce has to say.
What's not to love about Ireland? This tiny island that has shown the greatest gift of poetry and storytelling. I love the Kerry coastline. I love the Ring of Kerry. My father, Tom Brosnan, was a Kerryman, so I try to go back there as often as I can. And what do I miss about Ireland? It's the people. The sheer stamina and life force of Irish people from this great, beautiful landscape. I'm a Navan man, County Meath. I left Ireland when I was a boy. I was 11. So over these many decades now going back, there's always something great to discover.
Who better to narrate that?
He says it all about Ireland. If you've got any touch of Irish in you, you're going to want to get there one day and explore your heritage, meet the people. And I recommend that you try and get off the beaten path a little bit. Go into those smaller villages where you can meet the real people and really just soak it up. I still have my WestJet refund from last year when I was supposed to be going to Ireland, and I will be using that hopefully later this year or early next year. And when I go there, I go and stay with my cousins in Dublin, and we always have a grand old time, and we go out to see the Gaelic football and go out to the pubs and have a sing-song, and it's the greatest thing ever. So thank you so much for listening to my stories. I'd love to help you with your travel to Ireland. It's easy to find me, thetravellady.ca. That's when I chose the website. I thought, let me make it really easy. Or you can find me on Facebook as well. And I'd be happy to take any questions. If I can't answer your question, I'd be happy to find out the answer for you and let Colleen know, and then she can pass it on to you. But thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. If you'd like to end your screen share, and then everybody can see your beautiful face, and we'll get some questions here. You're welcome to use the Q&A function at the bottom, or chat. I'll go to some chats. We've had some chats pop up there while you were speaking. And Marg, thanks very much for joining us. It's great. I'm pleased that you could join us today, even though you are just a dollop Scot. And Terry, top of the morning, and to the rest of the day to you. So it's she says it's so nice to have Lesley give us a trip to Ireland. That's from Terry in Calgary. Alberta, when you were talking about the Famine Memorial, he mentioned that there is also one in Boston.
Yeah.
And don't have a name here. Someone mentioned while you were doing the kissing the Blarney Stone that she had done that, and it was pretty darn scary.
Yeah.
As well as in talking about the bridge. Someone has informed us here, it's a type of lava stone formation. Volcano from underwater, apparently. Barb, I hope you were able to capture the sound. She had a little bit of a problem with sound there. Anne, thank you. That was great. Oh, from Dublin. And I think I saw in our registrations, we had a couple of people from Dublin joining us. So thank you very much for coming all this way.
Wonderful.
You'll have a great celebration there. Gloria, we loved Ireland. My mom used to make us wear shamrocks every St. Pat's Day to school. And again, Patricia, thank you. We've got a few questions coming in. From Chang, how long is the flight from Calgary to Ireland?
If you can get the non-stop flight from Calgary into Dublin, which we did, it's about 8 hours, I think, 8.5, not too bad at all, usually an overnight flight.
Okay, and so from here, would you go to Toronto or Montreal and fly out from there, or is there direct from Calgary?
There were direct flights with WestJet, so hopefully when the schedule comes back, then we will have those direct flights. That's a bit of a question mark at the moment, because we know that the airlines have been so badly affected by the pandemic. So we're not really sure if we're going to have the connectiveness that we used to have. Yes. But we do think that with the big surge in interest that's going to happen, we will get more and more flights coming back, and a direct flight's definitely the way to go. However, I must add that when we did Ireland, we went direct into Dublin, but then we flew home from Shannon. And if you fly home from Shannon, you're generally going to do a stop in Toronto.
Oh, okay. It's been on my bucket list, as I mentioned. You know, my father had traced our family tree back, as we had spoken, and I'm trying to remember, is it Losha, Queens County?
Yes.
I was interested in your discussion about the famine, because starting in 1845, my dad had traced back to our first ancestor coming to Canada in 1854. So I'm kind of curious as to why, you know, when it was so dire, it took him 9 years, but, you know, how did he fare that 9 years during?
I think that it was pretty hard getting out, getting passage to get into America. A lot of people had to save up and maybe go and work in one of the cities to save up their passage.
That may have very well been. It makes you curious to think back of what their lives might have been. Talking about the travel, do you anticipate that we will need vaccination passports, proof documentation of having been vaccinated before we can travel?
I think that might be a situation. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of countries that are saying they want to see proof of a vaccination so you can avoid quarantine when you arrive. Also, there have been some countries saying that a negative COVID test will be sufficient. But I think that maybe vaccination passports are going to be a thing in the same way as yellow fever. You have to show your vaccination to go to some countries. So time will tell on that. There's been some opposition to that. I know the Canadian government has not made a decision on that. Initially, Trudeau was a bit lukewarm on that idea, and now he seems to be warming up to the idea. So time will tell.
If it means that we can freely travel, you know, whatever.
Exactly.
Anonymous, I'm disappointed the ficus is on the divide. There are, focus, maybe. There are so many beautiful beaches, cultural sites. Well, there's more than we can possibly touch on today.
Oh,
and
yeah,
lots of opportunity to follow up. This is just a little bit of a teaser here today. And one of the things that you touched on, you know, for me, you know, watching productions like Game of Thrones, I think even the Vikings, some of that program with there's been a lot of movie and television production taking place in
Right.
these beautiful craggy green hills and spaces there. So there is, I read a book just recently that was interesting about, Scots and the Irish, the Scots that settled in Ireland and, fought for King James and, things like that.
Yes.
So there's so much out there that you can capture the
Oh.
history in so many different ways that
There is. The history is fantastic, and it goes very deep. And I do recognize the comment that Ireland does have its share of troubles, as many other countries around the world. So, but you know what? They're a united people now for the most part, and it's made them stronger.
Absolutely. And Spooner looks like a great place. Maureen, I had a tour of Ireland booked for June 2020, so I still have my WestJet credit and my tour deposit. Is there any indication it'll be safe to visit Ireland? I'm thinking of waiting till 2022, even though I have already had my first COVID shot.
I think in 2022, you'll be absolutely fine. Ireland is making good strides with its vaccination. On a personal level, my cousin and her 2 kids got COVID over there, thankfully not too badly. And my 89-year-old aunt got COVID, and she was as right as rain. So I think as we roll out the vaccine, but if you're hesitant in any way, keep it till 2022. I'm sure by then you'll be fine to travel.
What time of year? That's something that I've kind of toyed with because of my interest. Ideally summer vacation, but I understand it's a little rainy during summer. Is spring or fall a better time to go?
There's never any perfect time to avoid the rain in Ireland, unfortunately. You have to go and embrace it, but obviously you want to go in warmer times. So I would say spring from April onwards would be good. And if you do go in the springtime and you're doing the whole of Ireland, then probably better to start southerly and then work your way north.
I think that would be my interest. As I said, my interest is to go to Queens County and, see if I can find some records or documentations or cemetery stones or anything like that to pick up where my dad left off. So, and then I like you, my daughter, when she was born, I wanted her to have an Irish name. And she was baptized or Catholic, christened Catholic. And the Monsignor that christened her sang to her "Where the River Shannon Flows." Oh. And so I've always had in my mind that I wanted to take her to see the River Shannon.
Yes.
June, you didn't mention shamrocks. What about them?
Yeah, shamrocks is a little bit of a question there. The research I did with St. Patrick said that he never wore a shamrock and he never mentioned shamrocks. Of course, shamrocks have always been part of that fairy kind of background that I mentioned about the Irish, of bringing good luck and supposedly not being found anywhere else in the world. So everywhere you go now in Ireland, you'll find the shamrock on numerous souvenirs, and they do grow wild there as well.
Wow. I, into doing a little bit of research there, I saw that the shamrock, it may be attributed to St. Patrick, that legend kind of is that he explained the Holy Trinity using the leaves of the shamrock, so it has that kind of legend to it as well. So, and Anne, some of the cities in Northern Ireland have wrought iron walkways above the main street. Is there a specific reason for that?
Wrought iron walkways across the west.
I think almost look like a little bit of a +15 kind of thing. I did notice like a walk.
Oh yes, that's right. It probably goes back to the fortifications when it was a fortified town. So they would have had that access so people could easily get to the walls if there was any kind of threat.
And Maureen, my great-grandparents came separately through Ellis Island, met and married in New York, and eventually settled in the Irish area of Ontario near Peterborough. Although the Irish accent is not as strong there, my late father did have some Irishisms in his speech.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
I'd love to know what some of those Irishisms are, Maureen. Some of them that you can share with us. Alberto, thanks for joining us again. We appreciate your support of these presentations. Last year, the same thing, we could not travel, so how to go and visit my County Mayo
County
travel.
Mayo.
And where is County Mayo?
That's in the south as well. So you'd have to fly into Dublin most likely to get there. You know what? You may be able to get there later on this year. We've all of us in the travel industry are just keeping a watching brief over this to see when it's going to be safe to travel. Obviously, we have to have the travel advisory lifted as well, because with the travel advisory in place, it makes things difficult, like travel insurance. But we're hoping soon.
Yes, absolutely. And Kathy Lewis was asking the same, we're the same mindset. When is the best time to go when it's not too cold and wet? And I think you referred to spring, maybe early summer as being best time. So Kathy, we'll coordinate our schedules and maybe we can go together. Anyone else have any questions in Q&A for Lesley? I'm just going to pop over here to Anne from Dublin says September is also lovely. So that's a good time of year. You know, thinking about people's vacations times. And what did you say you were from Dublin? I don't know if you can answer me back. I'm sorry, I can't chat personally. I think you mentioned that you were from Dublin. In the meantime, Gloria, my name is Croke, and Croke Park is a fantastic soccer field to visit.
Yes, exactly. And I actually went down there at one of the matches when I was with my cousin. He's a mad football fan. So the songs and the singing in the stands are something to see.
LM, I'm flying from US to do folks meetup in Ireland. This is a wonderful presentation. My family came from Ireland to Canada and to the US as well. LM, I wish you bon voyage. And Anne had previously said, come and see us after lockdown. Absolutely. Wendy, a great presentation. Thank you. My grandma was from Strabane, Ireland. Did I murder that? It is in the north, I believe. And Sue, happy St. Patrick's Day from New Jersey. Wonderful information, so much beauty in the north. One of the things that we have discovered with these our Kerby presentations, by having our registrations on Eventbrite, this has opened up such a wonderful opportunity for us to take Kerby Center globally. So all of our presentations, we are most fortunate to have people joining us from the UK, from India, Dubai, the United States, all across Canada. So this is, we're really pleased to see so many people joining us here for our presentation today. And if no one else has any further questions, then perhaps we'll call today's tour coming to an end. Lesley, this has been absolutely amazing opportunity for us. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to work with you again in the future. There's so many places in the world to explore that during this time that we just cannot. So we appreciate it. Thank you very much. And what I'm going to also do is, if you don't mind, I'm going to do a little screen share, and also wanted to let you know that today's recording will be on our Kerby YouTube channel, and I would encourage you to I would encourage you to subscribe to the Kerby YouTube channel. I often let people know that our videos are there, and all of the previous videos from over the year are there. But one of the things that we're learning is the opportunity to subscribe to our Kerby YouTube channel. So I would encourage you to go visit and subscribe, and you can leave some comments and that kind of thing. It's helpful for us to be able to see how many people we are reaching. And it's also tax time, so just wanted to make sure that remind everyone that if you are in need of support to get your income taxes completed, it is imperative for people that are over 55 in order to be able to ensure that you continue to receive your benefits to get your taxes done. So if you need some support, by all means, contact us at Kerby, and we'll be happy to set up an appointment for you. And all of our, we are essentially closed to the public to this point, but all of our programs and services are operating in order to make sure that we meet the needs of our community. So make sure that you reach out for anything that you might need, as well as we have just opened our new Kerby Center Cafe. For those of you who are familiar with Kerby Center and come in to visit us, we have revamped the whole dining room, which is now the Kerby Center Cafe. The menu, as well as we're offering curbside pickup for anybody that's interested. So you can go to visit our kerbycenter.com for more information about that. We do have some people coming into the facility by appointment for wellness and taxes and things like that. So we do have dine-in meals there as well. So looking forward to checking out their new menu myself, as well as memberships are available. If you don't have one, or to renew your 2021 membership, are available. And we do hope that you will enjoy today and will join us for our next presentation, which I think is going to be something that will be most helpful for all of us that have been isolated, learning movement, learning for mental well-being, with Ryan Hoffman. I'm not sure, some of you who are familiar with Kerby may know Ryan from having led some of our Feldenkrais fitness classes. And so we'll hope that you will join us for that next Wednesday, March 24th. And something that I've always been curious is, where the heck does all our digital stuff go when we're gone? And how do our children and our loved ones, our families, find what we have? Emails, online banking, taxes, anything like that that we have done online. How do those people that we leave behind find out our information, and where exactly does it go? So we're looking forward to having Esther Silberg join us to be able to help us with that. And again, Lesley, thank you so much for today. This was absolutely wonderful. And again, Servus Credit Union for your ongoing support of our presentations. Mark P has, again, thank you for your great presentation. They were in Ireland 3 years ago. Her hubby traced his family back to Athcarn Castle in County Keels. And so she's looking forward to going back when we have the opportunity to travel again. Lots of great accolades here for you, Lesley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. And Colleen, thank you for inviting me. You happen to hit on a topic that's close to my heart.
Absolutely, absolutely, mine as well. And you made my St. Patty's Day. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.